funny, I have a question that's sort of specifically for Stacy, but one of the things that you just said reminded me. I had lunch with Kat Sanborn from Viva last week, or I guess you'd call it lunch. We had beers. It was a meal in a certain time. She said, I said to her, you know, she's kind of a mentor to me now, and I said to her that sometimes I feel guilty for asking authors to do so much. I'm like, you just wrote this book. Can you now please write 100 blog posts that are stellar, that everybody shares? And I do think that that is a lot to ask sometimes, but she said something to me that I thought was really important, and I think it's really great too to have like Megan here and have Peg here who can also identify with this. She said that I feel very suspect of a writer who doesn't want to write. So for any publicist out there who's also felt kind of guilty, I thought those were wise words. So you do want to be mindful of your author's time, of course, but you should love to write as well. But for Stacy, I wondered, because I know that you also probably have authors sometimes who do feel the overwhelming, like, do I go on LinkedIn, do I go on Pinterest, do I go on Twitter, do I go on Facebook, do I do all of this, do I have any time left in my day? What would be like the one or two things that you would say, look, if you're going to do anything, these are the things you should be doing?
I think probably you guys know the answer to that. Facebook is really the obvious thing. I think if an author doesn't, if you're an author and you don't want to blog, you shouldn't blog. You shouldn't, I don't think you should force something on yourself that won't naturally sort of work for you. That said, Facebook is quite easy. It doesn't really require that much of your time, but it should require some kind of planning. You know, when I think about our authors, you know, at one point we said, okay, well, if an author doesn't have a blog, then, you know, we will give them the tools to set one up. We'll recommend, you know, which software sites they should use, like WordPress, and we put that in our author guidelines. And that's there, but I think, again, it's a time thing. A lot of our authors are academics. Even if you're not an academic, you have a job, you have a life, you have a family. If that's not something that you naturally want to take on, it's not going to succeed. So I think you just have to, if you're a publisher, you just have to have a realistic conversation with your author about the kind of time that's needed to actually make something successful. And also speaking to your point where, you know, once an author turns in a book, the idea that their work is done in some way, I don't think is very realistic. And I try to be frank with our authors about that. And I ask them to do all sorts of things, like we do a Q&A, and I'll ask them to answer 5 of my questions. I'll ask them to create annotated tables of contents for their books. Yeah, I could ask the editor of the book to do that, but these are the kinds of things that I send out to the media. So it gives a producer on the other side, whether they're radio, TV, or web producer, a sense of who this author is. I've kind of done some of their work. I've asked the questions that might be asked of in an interview. That producer or blogger, whomever we send the book to, doesn't have to read the whole book. They can read the intro to the book and then the annotated table of contents. So going sort of outside the social media world and kind of getting to basics like that, those are the types of things we ask our authors to do. And if they're comfortable with Facebook and Twitter, yeah, they should be there, but if they're not, then it's just not going to work, and I don't think that every book really is going to rely on that. And if someone's not excited about it, I think you're imposing something that's just not going to work. Because even if we've had ideas where we thought, okay, well, the author sets up a Facebook account, and then we'll give the password and login to an intern, and when they're in once a week, then they'll go and post and da-da-da, and, you know, it doesn't really work. Another thing I was going to suggest, too, that some authors are apprehensive about on Facebook is to, you know, they have their personal Facebook page, and now they've maybe published their first book, and they're a little wary of using that platform to promote their work. And that's another thing that someone should think about really seriously, because your friends and your family are your first fans. You need their support to come out to readings, whatnot. And unless you're Stephen King, you need that base that's right there. And so we've learned that instead of an author who, say, might be sort of wary of that and asks us to instead create a book page with the title rather than the author name, we say to them, we try to encourage them to explain exactly that. We've set up Facebook pages for book titles, and it just doesn't work, because it's yet one more place for people to get lost, and your author might have already 1,000 fans already. And the same thing with Twitter. So I think it's, I don't know, maybe a sense for authors to not separate their personal lives so much, because the way that you benefit when you open up and you kind of allow your work life to seep into that is so great. And again, it's like you're relying on your real world friends and family. That's your core. And then your publisher is helping you get media to expand your reputation and knowledge, public knowledge of your work. So.
I just want to do another show of hands because I love it so much. How many people are using Pinterest right now? Okay, for a second it was really quiet in here. So maybe like a third of the room, a quarter of the room? So maybe less. So I wanted to share a quick story about Pinterest and then talk to you guys about it. We had a post on NAB Communities.
You want to tell people
what Pinterest is? That's a very good point. Okay, so Pinterest is, how do you describe Pinterest? It's a site where it's very visually based. So you make a Pinterest profile and you have what are called virtual pin boards. So if you think of like a wall with a bunch of bulletin boards on it, and you stick things to them and you organize them by the things you like, they always say it's housewives on there. Housewives and women who want to get married, because almost all of the pin boards are about your wedding. I've seen one for girls that are like, if I ever get married again, this is what my wedding will look like. I like fashion a lot, so I have like a fashion pin board, and I put all the things I'll never be able to afford on there. So Pinterest but it's a site where you can share the things that you like or you're interested in, and other people can repin your pins, and it's all based on pictures. So it's an interesting site. It's felt a lot like an overnight viral success, and I'm not really sure exactly why, because I guess it's been around for a while, but for some reason in the last 6 months or so, it's just exploded. But one story we had with NAB Communities, we had this post that was on our site, and it was how to grow your own sprouts. And it was an excerpt from one of our books, Rawlicious. Yeah, Talia's here, she's the one who really knows. And she posted this like months ago, maybe even a year ago or so. Somebody who was on Pinterest found it, and it exploded. We looked at our traffic a week later, and we were like, holy crap, we just like quadrupled our traffic on the site. How did it happen? And it was because of this one pin on Pinterest started a wildfire, and there was just this explosion on Pinterest of people reposting this how to grow your own sprouts post. So from that one post, we saw this huge surge in traffic, and it's actually helped. We always know that the sprouts post has resurged on Pinterest when our traffic jumps up again. So having really shareable content and using on sites like that, if it takes you 2 minutes to pin something, it can be worth it. But I wanted to ask you about Pinterest. Are you guys using Pinterest, and have you found it to be good for book promotion or for event promotion? Or are there other sites like Pinterest that you would recommend that people use? Anybody?
I don't use it.
You don't use it?
So we actually did just start a Pinterest account, and I think it might be too soon to gauge its success, but Pinterest, if you haven't been to Pinterest, I hadn't been there myself until about a month ago. I didn't know what it meant when people said I'm pinning, or this is the language, like I'm tweeting and Facebooking. It's image based, and so is Tumblr. And if you are an author, publisher who has lots of images, most of us do, usually starts with a book cover, or if a book is about a particular subject, like a plant, it's so easy to go and sort of search and pull and kind of add to these boards. City Lights has its own photo archive, so it's really easy for us to get things. The bookstore, people are taking pictures of it all the time. So we have these thematic boards there. The success of it, I don't think, I think that the traffic is increasing just like anything, but, I feel like in terms of the places where you want to spend your time, or the places that seem effective at this point in the social media world seem to be still Twitter and Facebook, but, that could, a year from now, we could be having a totally different conversation, and that could be straight up there, so. I think it's just good to try and be in these places if it makes sense, if it feels right. So again, I guess Pinterest, if you're kind of image-based, if you have interesting images, you might check it out.
And I also just started a Pinterest account. I only have 2 pins up so far. I haven't spent enough time on it yet to figure out how to use it as an author, because pretty much everything I read on the web is text, and I'm not big into reading about interior design and fashion and things that have images. And so I started one for books, and I'm starting to pin book titles, and I pinned a picture of the Mexican vampire woman last night that I just learned about this woman. I'm fascinated by her. She has horns implanted in her forehead. But yeah, I just haven't figured out quite yet, as far as book publicity and marketing, how to use Pinterest. I think, it's pretty new for all of us, and it seems the people that are most into it that just kind of use it for fun. I haven't really seen anyone use it yet for marketing purposes and do it successfully.